Well, the revolutionary power of laughter. Is that something real or just a good title? That's what we're going to find out from our next guest, a writer, producer, filmmaker, and activist who is both a long-time New Yorker and an even longer-time African. She was born and raised in Kenya.
And the BX, right?
Exactly.
Well, right now she's here to talk about how comedy can relate to very serious issues and tell us one of her current productions, Sisters of Comedy, which can be seen next week at Caroline's on Broadway. Let's welcome Agunda Okeyo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So those are some good sisters you got in the lineup there.
Yes, some very good sisters.
Who's the funny one?
That's funny. That's a good one, yeah. They're all tremendous. They're all amazing women. Different styles of comedy, different regions of the country, maybe even different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And we also have a little segment on the showcase, which is the Revolutionary Power of Laughter segment, which is actually going to feature Michaela Angela Davis, who's, you know, a very famous New Yorker.
She's been riding that seat.
Yes, she has. I'm sure she has. And she's, you know, she's the brand manager for BET and Centric TV and former Essence magazine fashion editor, and regularly on CNN commentating and stuff. So, so Sisters of Comedy was a showcase I started about a year and a half ago, going on 2 years. That singularly features all black women, like all women of color. Mm-hmm. So it's the only all black women showcase at any of the top clubs in New York City. So getting that out there and making that a very kind of clear statement that I wanted to have a showcase that had very wonderful and talented women. Yeah. No one's doing anybody any favors here, but certainly we'll make sure there's all black women. And I stuck to that for the entire time that I've been doing the show. I've had only really 2 shows where I've had anybody else who doesn't fit that description. For Black History Month last year, I had some brothers on the show. Right. And then in June, I started this segment, The Revolutionary Power of Laughter, when a special guest, Gloria Steinem, who's a famous writer and activist, and recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Heard of her.
Yes, exactly. So she came onto the show and did this segment, and it was such a popular segment, and it really spoke to so much to what the show is about, which is about visibility and also being able to speak truth to power. Mm-hmm. And with her segment, I said, you know, let's keep this going. And so Michaela is going to be our second guest coming on with that non-traditional kind of segment.
Okay. Yeah. Now, in your comedy, the way you address race and gender roles, you know, do you think that comedy is the appropriate forum for this? Is comedy always the appropriate response to, you know, certain stimuli that we see? And how does comedy sort of help us learn?
Well, okay, I think it's one thing to say, for instance, make a joke. You can make a flip joke and it can have insensitivity and not make sense. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about comedians, like what comedians actually do is that they, like I said, speak truth to power. They're the people who are able to make fun of the person in power. Yeah. That's like the function of comedy, is to be able to actually make fun of people who otherwise, in certain contexts, maybe you wouldn't have the same power differential. So I think comedy is really critical, and comedians are very important, I think, to public speaking and to protest. I mean, a lot of the people who we think about, who we've loved in our lives, were very vocal, like George Carlin or of course, Richard Pryor. Mm-hmm. You know, Moms Mabley's an old school comedian who we owe a lot of her kind of history and her legacy to why we as women can be involved in comedy at all. So there's always people who are able to take and translate making humor or light out of kind of everyday situations to really bring forward a more like ironical or kind of more complex view of it. Dave Chappelle is a really great example of that. He does that all the time.
You spoke about Dave Chappelle. I was going over some videos, some YouTube stuff yesterday, and I was reading the comments. I'm a comment troll. I was reading the stuff that people were saying, and it reminded me of Dave Chappelle when he walked away from his show saying, you know what, some of them were laughing at things a little too odd, so I didn't know if I was the joker. Yeah. So who's your audience at like a Caroline's or these places when you have like Sisters of Comedy? Who's in the audience?
Well, that's a very good question, first of all.
And after that, it almost seems like a bamboozled sort of factor. So if you could bring that in as well.
Absolutely. And I'm very sensitive to that. So, you know, I'm a black woman, I'm an African woman. I grew up here in New York City. And when I started this showcase, I was very conscious of the fact that I was leading the kind of energy of what I wanted. So I wanted the women who were coming up to do the show, because I don't do stand-up on the showcase myself. I'm the impresario, if you will. But you know, so with the women who are on my show, I wanted them to have an audience who understood what they were saying. So a lot of so there is a very large number of black people who attend the showcases, and I actually target getting black people into these spaces too. So I would bring black people who rarely maybe would go to Gotham Comedy Club. They were coming to see my show.
Gotcha.
You know, and with Caroline's, which is actually our Broadway premiere. So next week is a really big time, and we really want everyone to show up and show out. It's going to be Wednesday next week. That's November 18th at 7:30 p.m. So please, please, please come out. But I do actually pay a lot of attention to that, because I even saw Dave actually at Gramercy Theater a few weeks ago when he was here. He's doing a national tour. Yeah, and I saw him, and you know, it took me a second to realize that most of the people in the audience were white. And I was looking, and I could tell with his material and how he was speaking, I was like, why is he communicating in this way? And I could tell he was communicating with a consciousness that the people with whom he was speaking don't always understand what he's saying. So he actually had a couple teaching moments in the process of his actual stand-up.
The code switch.
Yes, exactly. And it was something where I was watching that, I was like, oh, I see. And that's actually something that I find a little frustrating about the experience of becoming popular in this country, is that there's this kind of culture, relationship to owning black people and owning black people's material and their bodies and our content and just taking it. You know, Paul Mooney has a great joke about, you know, when you get to a certain point as a black person, you're very popular, white people just take you. He's like, you just get taken, you just take you.
You just get drafted.
Yeah, they just take you. But anyway, so the thing is, I do pay attention to having a very diverse show. And even the women, they're all black women, they're all different black women. They come from different backgrounds, different histories.
They're not all the same?
Of course, I know, right?
Oh,
Shaka.
okay.
Yeah, I know. So, you know, so I pay attention to making sure that all kinds of people feel comfortable at the showcase, but there is this kind of comfortable environment where we can speak truth and not feel that we're being exploited, you know?
So is there a difference between black funny and white funny then? Like, you see Dave Chappelle and he's in front of a million white people. If he was doing this thing in the hood, it would be a different show.
Right, well,
presumably.
Yeah, presumably. I mean, environment, it does make a difference. And I think that's why, like, the reason why I started producing and stand-up and comedy versus, say, for instance, just launching into a stand-up performing career, right, was because I recognized that you have to have people at all levels of a business in order to have proper diversity. So you needed to have someone who's behind the scenes, who knows the politics of maybe what would come up when you're on stage, so that they're sensitive to maybe how they kind of deal with the community. Yeah. So I think that culture, the experience of race in this country, because we know it's a very, very racist society, all these experiences, I think they do lend to your comedy maybe being a little different. But funny is funny. That's one thing for sure. Like, if you see someone who's funny, no matter what background they are, that's just funny. Yeah. So that is a really kind of general equalizer, which is great. And all of us understand humor. You can go anywhere in the world and you can meet somebody who you don't know what they're saying, but you can tell they're funny.
He's funny.
Yeah, you know, so.
Now, all the people you sort of named are people sort of older. You know, who are some of the contemporary comedians right now, besides the ladies right here, that you sort of follow and watch their work? And do you think comedy has changed in this day of the internet, where people, you know, sort of just go online and catch the routine?
People are so sensitive.
Well, yeah, well, okay.
Or insensitive. People, they're trolls nowadays. So,
yeah, that's
you know,
true.
it's a different comedic atmosphere.
That's true. That's true. I mean, okay, to answer your first question, let's see. I've worked with a lot of comedians, so it's like now it's like parse through the people, and I don't want to leave anyone out. If I don't mention you, it's not because I don't love you. Someone who I really like, who's on the scene, who isn't on my show, because I really like all of them.
I just want to know who to watch.
Who I watch? Well, I watch a lot of live stand-up, so I'm a big advocate of actually going to clubs and seeing comedians. Yeah. So, for instance, there's a comedian who I really enjoy. He's a white American comedian from Louisiana named Mark Normand. He's very popular, and he's been on like Inside Amy Schumer, and he's doing his thing professionally. He's a working comedian, and he's hilarious, and he does a lot of really interesting material that does touch on race and sexuality and gender and class. And he does it in a very kind of punchy, good way. And he has I almost dare I say, almost old school way of just being able to deliver a good joke. Yeah. Like, he just gets to the punchline like every time. And he's very entertaining. Someone else who's a younger comedian, she's South Asian, Suba Agarwal. She's really wonderful. She's also a very funny comedian, and she has her take on her experience being a South Asian woman. I believe from New York, maybe Long Island, I think. Yeah. And she has her kind of spiel, and she's it's just a matter of time before her name will be household.
Have you ever heard of this Greg Johnson guy?
Greg Johnson.
No, he's a co-host here. He has a show 7:30s at Thursday at Splitty. But I wanted to talk to you about the sensitivity thing because recently, like Jerry Seinfeld made some news, and there's a few comedians on like that college circuit, and like these college audiences are too sensitive. Everyone is saying ism, or your whatever IST at the end of it. So how do you feel about that? Do you tailor jokes? Is it like, oh, too soon, or I can't go there with the feminist, or the black folks or the Asians? Like, how do you negotiate?
Or you just claim you're a comedian?
Those waters?
Well, I mean, you know, from my perspective on that, the whole politically correct thing, I'm not really a fan of politically correct because I think that it really just, it allows people to really excuse themselves from being racist. Because the fact of the matter is people have opinions that aren't particularly very progressive. And usually what they do is they use coded language to get around it, but it's still there. So I'm not a fan of politically correct. I'm a fan of people being intelligent, sensitive, conscious of words and phrases they choose. But in terms of just trying to somehow skirt over your racism and just give me some sort of like sanitized version of how like you're not like I don't see color. Like if you tell me I don't see color, be like, you see color. Trust me.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
Exactly. Like you see color. There's a couple comedians I know who have good jokes on it. But yeah, so I mean, I think that we have to be culturally sensitive. But even right now, one of the biggest problems I think in the United States is people are not really coming to terms with the fact of the reality that there is tremendous inequality on race, class, and gender levels in this country, sexuality. I mean, it's extremely unequal. So, you know, in order to actually really even get into those conversations, I think we just have to get into it. And a really good comedian knows what they're doing. They're not gonna mention something or say something kind of off color without any real purpose or meaning to it. Usually you can really tell, like, between somebody who's like an amateur, so to speak, and somebody who really, yes, exactly, and being shocking, you know what I mean, just to shock you, versus someone who really knows, you know what, I'm saying this thing to kind of try to address something. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of young people are growing up now where they want to think that we're past a lot of the issues that we just aren't. So essentially for them to bring these things up seems like you're bringing up old news. But the point is, you know, the older they get, when they enter the workforce and they enter reality, not reality TV, they'll know that, you know, these problems are still there. And I think comedians are people who, because of, usually you come from some sort of family, culture, background, experience where you had that kind of like, you know, you felt discontinuity, you felt awkwardness, you felt outsider, you felt that feeling of being an outsider. So usually comedians have that kind of ability,
it's the remix from the
speak truth to power.
I hate to cut you off. I think we're about at the end of our time, but this has been a very serious conversation
that this became a
with a very funny lady.
I know, she's hilarious. Go out November 18th, 7:30 at Caroline's on Broadway debut.
Yes.
Sisters of Comedy.
Thank you very much.